Hello, everyone. Greetings, greetings. Hello, hello. Welcome to our webinar, Closing the Class Period and Closing the Day. Before we get started, to give everyone time to log in the chat box, share your name, your role, and where you are joining us from. We would love to hear. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Closing the Class Period and the Day. And if you're just joining us, please put your name, your role, and where you are joining us from.
It looks like the chat is disabled. If you could.
Let's see.
Thank you, everyone, for letting us know.
Yes, because I can't see it. Okay, can chat with everyone. Are we good now?
Let's see if anyone is able to chat in the box now. Perfect. There we go.
I see you all. Thank you all for letting us know. Welcome. Once again, if you're just joining, we've just started this webinar, Closing the Class Period and Closing of the Day. And let us know your name, your role, and where you are joining us from. Oh, Alyssa, I see a lot of people rolling in.
Yes, thank you all for sharing with us.
Massachusetts, Arizona. All right, Alyssa, I think that we're good to go.
Great. So as people are entering, you'll see that there are more responses coming into the chat. So make sure to look there, see where everyone's coming from. It's really great to see everyone here tonight. We're very excited to have you. This webinar, I'm saying tonight because I'm on the East Coast, but whatever time it is for you, this webinar will focus on closing the class period and the day. And through this evening, you will learn about how to plan a purposeful closing structure that can help students to reflect, regroup, or recharge for the next period or for the next day's learning. So we'll have a chance to hear from everyone here on this screen that you're already seeing. They're going to introduce themselves in just a moment. And you'll also have the chance to ask any questions. So some of you are quite savvy, and during that little hiccup, you figured out where the Q&A box is. That'll be a spot for you to put those questions throughout, which Amber will remind you of when she gives you some of the webinar logistics. But know that there will be time to take those questions. So as they arise, please be sure to hold on to them and ask us later on. I'll start by introducing myself. So my name is Alyssa Bruner. I work full-time for the Center for Responsive Schools as a curriculum and instructional designer with a focus on elementary school because I spent my teaching career in first, second, and fifth grade. I am located in Washington, D.C., and I am joined here by some of my lovely colleagues, the first of which will introduce herself is Amber.
Well, hello. Thank you. Again, my name is Amber Searles, and I am a curriculum and instructional designer for the Center for Responsive Schools. And I am here in South Carolina. I'm on the East Coast, so good evening, good afternoon to some. And I am happy to be here with you all. And I'm just going to jump into it. Susie, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Amber. Hi, I'm Susie Ghosh. I'm a second grade teacher in Fairfax County, Virginia. That's right outside of Washington, D.C. This is my 25th year teaching. I've taught second and third grades. So I'm really excited to share some of my thoughts about closing the day with everyone tonight. Julie, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself next.
Thanks, Susie. Good evening, everyone. My name is Julie Kelly, and I've been in the field of education for 24 years. I've been a classroom teacher, third, fourth, and sixth grade, as well as a special area teacher. I'm currently a librarian in a pre-K 3 through 8th grade classrooms, school setting. And I am tonight coming to you from the state of Virginia. And I'm looking forward to our conversation surrounding closing the class period. And now I'm going to pass it on to Rio.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Rio Clementi. I am a sixth grade social studies teacher in a 6th to 8th school, a middle school in Randolph, New Jersey. This is my 23rd year teaching in middle school, so I'm definitely looking forward to providing some insight for closing a class period from a middle school teacher's perspective.
All right. Thank you all for introducing yourself. And before we jump into the topic, there's just a few webinar tips and some housekeeping that we would like to present to you. If you are experiencing a lag in your computer, we suggest that you close the programs and browsers to maximize your bandwidth, or you can exit and re-enter this webinar. We don't have to admit anyone in. You can just jump out, jump back in. Also, we want to use the chat feature, and we're going to be asking you to use the chat feature tonight. And with the chat feature, we're asking that we make positive comments and connections with our colleagues. And as Alyssa stated earlier, we will have the Q&A. We will be looking through that often as we talk to our panelists, just in case you all have any questions. And last but not least, we will be recording this. So if you have any colleagues that were not able to make it to the webinar, if they signed up for this webinar series, you will receive the recording and they will also receive the recording. So let's jump into it. Here are the learning goals for this webinar: closing the class period and the day. I will give you a moment to look at these learning goals. And as you're looking, I want you to select a focus that you really want to hone in and listen for throughout this webinar, excuse me.
All right. So since this is a time for us to learn from one another, we are going to, I see someone saying the slides aren't visible now. That's intentional. We're just going to kind of chat with each other now. So don't feel like you're missing out on anything. I'm actually going to start by asking you a question. I want you to think of your favorite TV show. So take a second and get that into mind. And how does it make you feel when that favorite TV show ends on a cliffhanger? So you can go ahead and type in the chat if you want, and then we'll start by hearing from our panelists in just a moment. How does it make you all feel when your favorite show ends on a cliffhanger? Let's start with Susie as the answers are coming in. How does it make you feel?
Oh gosh, when I think of cliffhangers, I'm definitely old enough to remember the time when you had to wait all summer. When there was a cliffhanger that ended a season and you couldn't just stream the entire season. And it would be sometimes exciting, like, oh, what are they going to do next? But a lot of times I'm like, no, you can't leave me like that. You can't leave me hanging. I would definitely, excuse me, I would be frustrated, might not be the right word, but definitely a little bummed and just kind of wondering.
I see that your sentiments are echoed in the chat. Anything to add, Julie?
It's interesting because yes, I get frustrated as well when it ends on a cliffhanger, and then it's like, okay, but I gotta learn more. So then it's like, how can I find out, what's the scoop behind what's going to happen in the next season?
Rio, how about you?
I think for me, I don't know if this is a little negative Nelly me, but I'm always afraid that the show that I like is going to get canceled, because I've definitely seen plenty of shows that end on a cliffhanger and then the show doesn't get renewed. And then you literally never know what's going to happen. So that is the one, I guess, perk of something like streaming shows, because at least you kind of know. Maybe I'm not going to get invested if I know there's going to be no follow-up season.
I think that's very fair. I've had that feeling myself too. So it sounds like from what the three of our panelists are sharing and from what I've been reading in the chat, there's this underlying feeling of uneasiness, or like it's not a great feeling to be left wondering what's left. Even if you're excited, that's kind of an unsettling feeling. And you may have already made this connection, or you're like, why is she talking about TV shows? But either way, the point that we want to draw you to is that in the classroom, if students are left feeling confused about what's happening next, or like they're on a cliffhanger, it's not going to feel great for them. So closure can really help prepare students for what's next. It can help them to see that their successes of the day are really celebrated and they really matter. It can help them to reflect, and it can help them to know what's coming next. So regardless of the grade level that educators work with, it's very important to have these intentional closing routines that bring a sense of closure to the class period or the day.
And with that being said, the goal of both closing the class period and closing of the day are similar: to allow students to end on a positive and reflective note, and to also prepare them for what's next. So I have the first question for the panelists, and that question is for you all. Why is it important to provide this time for students at the end of the class period or day? Why is it important to end on a positive or reflective note? And anyone, Susie, you want to start us off?
Sure, I'll go ahead. Tonight I'm going to be talking mostly from the point of view of closing the day, because I have my second graders all day, and so I end the day with a closing circle. And I just think that that is so important, just because kind of just like we start the morning intentionally with morning meeting, and we kind of set like, okay, we're here together, we're starting the day. I feel like the end of the day needs just as much intentionality. And it gives students a sense of, okay, so we're done with the day. We have a little bit more time. I really feel like it is a time for them to kind of make sense of the day, you know, whether we talk about something that we did, or we have one more game, or it's kind of one more time together. And it's kind of a nice little bookend. We've started the day together. We've done a lot of stuff. And then the end of the day is just a chance to kind of take a breath before we go home and kind of either talk about the day or reflect on something about the day.
Forgot to hit the unmute button. Thank you, Susie, for sharing. Julie and Ria, would either of you like to speak into that question?
Amber, I'll go ahead and speak to that. I'm a special area teacher, so typically the students are really excited to come to the special area classes. So like during the second half of their time that they're in the library, there's a lot of movement because students are browsing and exploring materials and checking out books. First half, we usually do a story or a chapter of a story. So in closing, I'm looking to help them switch gears so that they're ready to leave me in a state that they're calm and they're still and they're ready to go back into the classroom. And we also review what it is that we read about, an author we studied. So it kind of helps wrap up the class period as well.
And I would say just I guess a different perspective. So teaching middle school, you know, the school that I currently work in, they have 7 different classes. So they're shuffling from period to period to period. And I think if they don't have that opportunity to process and reflect on what they've done that period, they're dragging it in potentially to the next class, which means that teacher, unfortunately, doesn't get that kid at 100% because they're already thinking about what they just finished or were unable to finish. Obviously, with shorter class periods, and say if they're with it for a long period of time, giving them that opportunity gives them a chance to kind of realize that that class period is over. Now they can kind of leave it till the next day and then hopefully process and take something from it before they move on to their next class. And if it's the last period of the day, it's something that they can go home and enjoy themselves, as opposed to lingering thoughts.
So we've just learned, or heard rather, some of the reasons why it's important to provide this time. And I've seen that some people are adding to the chat too, and we value your input as experienced educators as well. So feel free to do so. So now that we're thinking about, okay, that's why it's important to give that time, there's another piece to this that's equally as important, and that is the routines or the structures around those closing routines. So when you're thinking about providing that time at the end of the day for closure, tell us why the closing routine or the structures that you use are important for teachers and students. And let's start with Julie.
Thanks, Alyssa. I would say that the closing routine, the structure of it, provides that sense of safety that they need at the end of the class. I teach and model the routine, and the students know what to expect. Like, this is how we close the class. And it just smooths out that transitional piece. It kind of just wraps up what we did together. And so also as a special area teacher, it helps me kind of reset. Like, okay, we just finished this. All right, I'll be getting another group in a minute, but let's finish. This is the routine. It just helps it go so much more smoother.
I want to just kind of jump in on that same concept. I think of so much time as a teacher, because I've been thinking about this probably only in the last couple minutes, but like so much time and energy is spent on when kids come into the class, right? So they have those routines every single day. And I feel like it's equally important at the end. And the idea of when you think about that belonging significance and fun, and if we're focusing on the belonging aspect of it, where you do know the routines, if a kid knows at the end of class there's going to be some type of a question that they're going to have to process what they've done, because they'll even say, are we going to have the closing question now? So once they know that, it's easier to have things run more efficiently. So just like you need it in the beginning, you need it at the end. So that consistent structure is going to benefit them and you, because it also keeps us in line to have that beginning, middle, and end of a lesson. And that ending should be something that is routine that they're used to on a daily basis.
And I would agree with both Julie and Rio. I mean, not just closing periods, but closing the day. It definitely needs that routine as well. It's something that like the kids depend on. They know to expect it. And also, like, if we think about the end of the day, no matter how well I model and teach a pack up routine, packing up is chaotic. It always is. No matter how much we model it and practice it, packing up is chaotic. And you start hearing like things, the announcements of like patrols and this and that, lots of things start happening. Kids know that they're going home soon. So that routine where everyone knows, okay, after we pack up, we sit in our circle, we come back together, we're calm and quiet again. That is definitely something that I think it stops the day from feeling like the runaway train, where you just kind of get to hit the brakes, stop one more time. And kids, they depend on it. They're like, okay, what are we doing in closing circle today? And then they're in a calmer place for when it is time for dismissal. So that routine is just something that is just so important to keep that order.
And thank you, Susie, for saying that chaos at the end of the day, when packing bags. And a lot of your colleagues in the comments, I see that they acknowledge, and thank you for acknowledging that, because all of us have that chaos. But as I'm hearing you all, it doesn't matter what the grade level is, the closing routine remains the same, and you have to fill out the day, and it may change. The activity may change on a day-to-day basis, depending on what your students need. So now, as we're thinking about that, how do you determine the type of closing your students need that day? So as you're teaching, and think about it with the middle school teachers, we don't get to see our students every day. For specials, we don't get to see them every day, all day. In elementary, we see them all day. So we would love to hear from your perspective. How do you close the class period, or how do you choose? How do you determine to reflect at the end of the day, no matter what classroom environment you are in? And Rio, can you start us off, please?
Sure. A typical middle school lease routine for my class, I teach social studies, so there's always going to be some type of closing question at the end of the class period, which is always connected to our lesson for that particular period. And either it's going to be done verbally where they'll share out whole group, or it's going to be something that is written or typed so I can look at it. So that way I can kind of, as a formative assessment, to see where they're at. So that way I can maybe improve my lessons in the future for them. But if it's been a type of day or a week where they've been working really hard, then our closing might be something like a brain break, because I'm also trying to build community and not everything can be academic. So sometimes we need to close on something fun, especially if it's a Friday, or even sometimes it's a Monday, because they're not necessarily looking forward to a nice full week of school. So if we can start off the week on a very positive note to end that period, they'll be more excited to come back. So it's either going to be written or something where they could do a four corner or some type of a brain break. It really depends on their mood. If they seem pretty down and out, we try to do something fun. If they're really into what we're doing, then we'll stick with that closing question to kind of help process the day or the period.
And I would say I kind of do kind of what Rio was saying. Like I have plans for closing circle, but they're flexible. They can change if I feel like my students need something else. So I do have plans of, certain days a week, we're going to play games to build the community. Certain days a week, we're going to do a reflective lesson of our reflection question of, something fun that we did today. Sometimes I'll have, theme days of Wonderful Wednesday. What's something wonderful going on in your life or in our classroom? But there are times where I might sense that my students need something specific. Perhaps it was a rough morning, we regrouped after lunch, and they really made it through the day. And I want to acknowledge that and say, hey, let's celebrate all of the things that we did to turn our day around. Or perhaps they are completely just, I know a reflective question won't go over well because they look tired and brain dead. I'm like, you know what, we're just going to play a game now. So I will have those loose plans, but I'll go with my gut sometimes. I'm like, you know what, something important happened today, and I want us to acknowledge it before we go home.
And jumping in on what Susie said, in terms of gauging what they need, I also use, since I'm a special area teacher and I kind of get a view of what the week's going to look like for my students, if they have like an assembly or a special event that they'll be going to later that day when I have them, I'll also kind of use that as an opportunity to reflect on, like, so this afternoon, we're going to have an assembly. What are some things that we need to keep in mind going into that? So it's also kind of a continuation of what the classroom teachers would be doing. Typically for my younger students, I stick with a calming closure, and with my upper elementary and middle school, we do more of a reflective closing.
Thank you, Julie. And Alyssa, I just want to clarify something before we jump too deep in. There is a question, what is special area? And special area teachers are social studies, art teachers, business education teachers, PE teachers, those specials that have a special niche. And in middle school, everyone are special area teachers in middle school. So I hope that answered that question. If not, please feel free to keep digging into it. Alyssa, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. And thank you all for the thoughtful answer so far. And you've already touched base upon what I want to get to next, but it also looks like some people in the chat are itching for this too. And those are those specific examples of closing activities that work well in your classroom. Maybe it's your go-to, maybe it's your favorite for when you have time. Just give us an example of what subject you're talking about and what grade level, and what is your go-to closing activity that you would choose to use. Anyone can start with this one.
Okay. Oh no, Susie, would you like to go? Okay. One thing that I know, especially, I mean, I don't teach math, but I know a colleague of mine who teaches math. The way that she ends the class, she has 3 cans, and the cans are I basically like, I don't know the concept very well, or I think I have it, I need a little more time, or I'm an expert and I can teach. And what she'll do is have them self-reflect. And as they're processing and leaving, they drop their name into these cans, and only the teacher can see it. So that way the teacher can kind of see what they need to work on after. But what I've seen in her class is, because of that type of closing, the kids are more willing to kind of ask questions in class. They feel more comfortable because they know it's okay to not necessarily know everything all of the time. And sometimes when we give them these type of a formative closure, whether it's a question or some type of a brain break, the idea is that it gives us a chance to see who's struggling, who needs help, and it gives them a chance to feel safe in the room to say, this teacher is going to listen to me if I say I don't understand, or they have time to process. But I would say with any type of discussion closure, if you want to end the period, having them talk in pairs first and then share out gives them a confidence of being able to, that one-on-one, building community, and then sharing out whole group. But any kind of closing type of question is always easy, and you can do a discussion already. Sorry, Susie, you're up. I'm good.
That's okay. Yeah, I'm just thinking about a few that I like. I always do the weekend is near on Fridays, where students choose a verb to say what they're going to do over the weekend, and they know it and they're ready. They're already thinking about their verb as they pack up. That's a fun one. There's some chants or songs that we do. I like theme days. So I like Thankful Thursday, where we talk about what we're thankful for in our classroom or what we're thankful for in our school. A new to me, I mean, it's been around for a while, but a new to me this year is my second graders love doing ABC summary. And so that is, we try to get through the alphabet. We have not gotten all the way through because limited time, but with every letter, we try to think of something that went with the day. So with the letter A, it's, oh, we heard a new author today when we read this book. I'll say B, okay, what do you think? And someone will say, oh, wait, it's Hassan's birthday today. And then we get to C, we're like, oh, wait a minute. Well, we were working on captions in our nonfiction book. And so we just kind of try to brainstorm together. Our record this year so far is we get to L before it's time for us to go, but it's something that the students are really starting to look forward to.
And as the librarian that sees a wide age group, the activities kind of vary. For my littlest ones, we do a lot of singing. For example, the more we get together and Goodbye Friends, and we'll do it in different speeds and different volumes. For as they move up a bit, we circle up and the students display the cover of their book that they've checked out. Then they share with a partner why they chose that book to check out. So everyone gets to see what everyone has checked out. And an activity that I use with my fifth graders specifically is at the end, if you could choose one word to describe how you're feeling, what would it be and why? So that's a go-to that I use.
These are all great ideas. One thing I think all of us in this webinar is wondering, the timing. As the day wraps up, oh my God, what do you do when you realize that you're running out of time, but you want to squeeze in a closing?
I would say the first thing I do is kind of pause and breathe and like quickly assess. My students are usually in the midst of checkout. So if I have a lot of students still needing to check out, I pause that process and then we do our closing, and then I get back to the kids that still need to check out.
Yeah, I would agree with Julie. The pause is important. And I think it is so tempting to just kind of be like, okay, there's no time today. But like even 2 minutes is enough to kind of, again, bring that kind of closure. And I think pausing and knowing that sometimes you leave things undone, and that's okay. So if I'm looking up at the clock and we're in the middle of this and we've got to pack, I'm like, I'm like, you know what? Sometimes I will stop my students. I'm like, I know we're not done with cleanup. I know that we're in the middle of this, but you know what? We need our closing circle. So leave everything. Let's come. We might do a really quick celebration and we don't have any more time to do one of our games or reflections, but it's still that structure that we're going to acknowledge and do and honor every day. And then after that, we clean things up in the morning, or maybe some of my bus riders who are, still in the classroom will help clean things up. But I think it's okay sometimes to leave things undone and go to the closing, because that I feel like you get more bang for your buck, and it's more important for the community than making sure everything's finished and leaving off the closing.
And I know obviously middle school section is very different. But one of the things that you can definitely do is just say, we're taking 30 seconds, talk to a partner. What's one thing that stood out to you that you learned today? Because I have found that, just writing things down and not saying it out loud, they don't hear it. They don't get a chance to even say something. So it could be that one thing that they pull from it, as opposed to if they just left and got nothing from it. So even a quick, it's not even a word. I'm sorry. A quick 30-second response is helpful. I know that the question came up for someone who teaches kindergarten. It might take a little longer because obviously with kindergartners, they really like to talk. I mean, we always joke in class that kids, their version of listening is waiting for someone's lips to stop moving and then they jump right in and talk. So at kindergarten, it might take a little bit longer, but just some simple question that they could share out for that little activity is probably enough to move on, especially if you don't get to be as deep as you want. As Susie said, sometimes you got to get right to circle because that's more important. But just the communication between the two kids would be a benefit, because you're still building that community once again where they practice their listening skills, especially as kindergartners. I'm guessing. I don't teach kindergarten, but I'm just assuming.
I believe you're assuming right. And that kind of ties wonderfully to what I wanted to ask next, which are, we've talked about the importance of closing routines. We talked about the importance of closing activities, but what are those long-term benefits of providing this time for closure? So we're thinking socially, academically, emotionally, like having done this for a while, what do you see as like a real benefit? Or is there an anecdotal story that comes to mind where you're like, thank goodness I put that side of time? Let's start with you, Julie.
So a couple of weeks ago, I had a fifth grade class, and fifth grade, not only do I close out their library time, I also close out their day. We go back to their classroom and I'm the one that dismisses them. So we did if you could choose one word to describe how you're feeling, what would it be and why? And they're going around, it's a Friday, so most of them are pretty excited. And this one kid said he was worried. And I was like, oh, what are you worried about? And his worry was that he left his sweatshirt on the back field and he didn't know how he was going to get it. So that was the easily addressed way to get his worry fixed. He had another adult in the building went out and got it for him. So I just feel so glad that I used that, because if he hadn't, I just imagined him going home, like telling his parents, I left my sweatshirt on the field at school. So that was an anecdote I had to share.
In terms of my second graders, I think my number one goal with Closing Circle is just to continue to build that community, and to make sure that we are seeing ourselves kind of as a team doing things together. The Closing Circle really can have the feel of like, look at what we did today. Look at what we did together today. What were we successful at today? So often I will ask them sometimes to reflect about something they individually did, but often it's, hey, what's one of our rules that we did really well today? Or how did we help each other today? And just getting them feeling like, okay, we're about to leave and we're about to scatter, but we're spending a little bit more time together, just like we started the day together. And then I just think like academically, when you talk to parents, they say, they talk to kids, say, hey, what'd you do at school today? And they say, nothing. What'd you learn at school today? Nothing. So, or I don't know. So Closing Circle is a great sum, even if it's just, what are some things we did today? And we list them. That kind of helps my second graders start to think, oh yeah, we did stuff today. I didn't just come to school and do all the things. I learned something today, or I did something today. And they're much more ready to kind of think about something and perhaps share with their family.
I would say a major benefit is the idea that if you're trying to teach them some kind of skill, whatever it might be. So I try to start off the class with some kind of positive message or inspiration or something to kind of motivate them. And then when we reflect at the end, sometimes it's like, how does this quote that we learned, how does that, apply to what you did today? Or you're talking about, what you were proud of, or, if there was a challenge that you had, what did you do to overcome it? because we're always trying to get them to have those life skills. And although the content is important, how well they work with others, or how well they persevere is just as important. So I think when you're having that kind of reflection, I like to think of it almost like a hamburger bun. The top looks different from the bottom. They're similar enough, they're connected, and everything you do in the middle is important. But just imagine eating that burger without the bottom. It seemed not really you could do it. It wouldn't be the best case scenario. So I think teaching them that it's important to reflect on everything. If you're reflecting on content, you can learn to reflect on decisions you make. You can reflect on decisions you have made. So everything is connected. And sometimes kids will say it. They'll be like, wait a minute, we did this. What did we do this for this reason? And I'm like, yes, that's exactly why we did it. And they're just like, you tricked us. I'm like, no, I didn't trick you. You just reflected and realized this was the purpose. Everything we do as teachers, we have a plan. And I think once the kids start to see that we're having them reflect and do things that's going to connect it to their other classes, they start to buy in more, or at least be like, all right, at least I know what we're doing has meaning. And I think that's why it's really important.
Thank you all for sharing. And I think we can all agree that those skills are very important for our students. So now let's consider how closing routines can be inclusive for all of our students. So the question is, how do you ensure closing activities, are inclusive for all students to be successful? And I can't remember who went first on the last question. So anyone can go ahead and jump in with this question.
I'll go ahead and start. When I think about just making sure that every student can be successful, I think of two things. One, I make sure that we're talking about things where the entire class was present in the room, because I have students leaving for different groups at different times, and I don't want to talk about a part of day when 4 kids missed it. So we're going to talk about successes when the entire class is together. That's one. And then if I'm thinking about some sort of reflection, I want them to feel like they all can think of something and they're not feeling like they're caught off guard or that there's a quote right answer. And so if it's something like, I want them to think about something they did say, we're first going to just kind of review, hey, what did we do in writing today? Okay. And what do we do in reading? All right. Now that we refreshed each other, all of our memories, now everyone pick one thing, just really scaffolding it. So I'm not expecting them to, pull something out the top of their head that they might've forgotten. So just really making sure that it is an accessible reflection question for everyone, regardless of how their day went.
When I have the students share a reflection, I'm very mindful to see how they partner. So we have a routine in finding your partner and just making sure that everyone has a partner to share with before we also then ask for volunteers to share out with the whole class.
One of the things that I know that you can do is if you're doing, say, table reflection before they share out whole group, you could make it known to your class that every group needs to have a facilitator, which their job is to ensure everyone at that table has a chance to speak and has their voice heard. So that way, that everyone's going to have a chance. Now, if you're doing some type of a closure where it's, say, a 4-corner, and one kid is there by themselves, like for example, how I get to learn kids, I'll say, if you're the oldest child, you go to one corner, middle child, youngest, and only child. And I don't know why it works out that way, but the only child is always one kid, like in every class. They never have a partner. I'm like, this poor kid. So I'll go to that corner and I'll talk with them. So they always have an opportunity of somebody to talk with. But always starting small has already been mentioned, in like a pair share, everyone has a chance. If you feel a kid is not having that opportunity, then you might have a closure that's maybe non-academic, as Susie had said, where they all have a chance to, talk about it, whether it's food or what they're going to be doing over the weekend or what they're excited about.
I wanted to actually add one more thing that I forgot to mention. I'm thinking also of being inclusive of other language speakers, because in my school, we're always getting students who are just coming in and learning English. So I think it's really important to keep games and structures the same over and over and over again. So as they're learning English, they're like, oh, I know this game. I know that these 3 words go here, or, oh, I know I can point to this on the schedule. So just keeping things really consistent over time so students who are learning English also can participate and are not left out from that.
Thank you all very much. So those are the questions that we had for you, but we have some great questions from our participants. And participants, if you're thinking of more, or if you put one in the chat that kind of got buried throughout the evening and you would like to separate it into the Q&A box, we may have time to get to your questions there. So the first question has to do with heavy winters, which over here in the DMV, Susie and Julie, we haven't had too much of, but we can try. So this has to do with first grade in a city where there's a lot of snow, and just the logistics of like, what does it look like for them to pack up when they've got that winter gear that takes a lot of time. Any suggestions? Like if they're bundled up before closing circle, they might get too hot. So Susie, I don't know if you want to take this because we're specifically thinking about first grade that's close to your wheelhouse. What would you do in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, we don't, hopefully we'll get some snow this year, but we don't have the complete bundling that we did. I grew up in PA in Pennsylvania, so I definitely remember the bundling. I would think, because I have all of my second graders, they pack up their backpacks, they leave their backpacks on their table with their coats and everything. So we are, because coats don't take too long to put on. But if we're thinking about all of that, off the top of my head, what I would do is probably do a lot of the packing up of backpacks, maybe put boots on and then come to closing circle, leave the coats off, and then knowing that if it's going to take a long time and maybe it's going to take them 5 minutes to bundle between closing circle and when they have to leave the door, just kind of working backwards from that time frame is always important. Timers are great, saying, okay, it's 5 minutes before dismissal, our closing circle has to end here. So 5 minutes before that is when we're going to start our closing circle. So 5 minutes before that is when, just kind of doing that logistically. And it does take some intentionality, and it takes some time to say, I'm going to stop whatever I'm doing at this time. Thing like that. I see that question right there saying, what's more efficient to pack up first? I prefer packing up because that's chaotic. Pack up first, and then come and sit down and have that calm. And then we sit there until we start seeing the silent dismissal, and then students get up from closing circle when it's their turn. That's my preference. That's also how I think a lot of responsive classroom teachers do it, because again, you get rid of the chaos and then you do that. But yeah, if you've got a lot of bundling, maybe you have to do it in parts. Maybe you have to do a lot of the chaos, closing circle, and then the final chaos. I don't know. That would be my thought.
I would agree. And as you were talking, we got that question yet again, like, do we do the pack up before or after? Ultimately, it's up to you. But I agree with what Susie is saying, that time can feel pretty chaotic. So to have that time of packing up and then the peaceful, joyful, fun closing afterwards can leave them without that sense of rush and chaos. It can really give them that last moment together in a more positive light.
All right. Thank you for sharing. And Susie, I'm going to give you a break on this one. And I'm going to go to middle school now. So we have a question. My classes are only 40 to 45 minutes. How long are closings for a middle school class on a routine basis? I feel like I never have enough time. So Rio, can you speak into that for us?
Yeah. So I would say you only need, if you want something, if you're very limited on time, I definitely think you can get away with just a pair share or something at your table, just to process. Or what I've done is I've set up almost like an online journal where I give them a question on the screen that is connected to what we're doing, and they type it in, and it only takes them a minute or so. And then what I'll do is I will read them after. So although they didn't share it with the group, I can see how well they understood it. One piece of advice that I would say, and I have no idea either how long you've been teaching, what you teach, because I know obviously if you teach math in ELA, timing is everything, and people are usually on top of you to make sure you get through everything. But one thing that I found over my career that's been beneficial for my sanity is I teach a little bit less each period. That way I have more time for that reflection, because the reality is if we go too fast, they don't understand it, and then I end up having to reteach it again the next day. or constantly repeating myself, and it leads to very fast burnout. So I feel like if you have to cut the lesson and then continue the next day, you're better off stopping early enough that you can do some kind of reflection and come back to it, because they're more likely to remember that. Because the problem is they're going to another period. If you have them first, now they have 6 or 7 other teachers. And if you give them a lot and they rush out, and then they get all the other ones, and those teachers hypothetically do the same thing, those kids are going to go home. And then, as Susie said, what'd you learn today? Nothing. And it could be they didn't learn anything because it's just like everything is just going around in their head. So I'd say you can do it in 2 minutes, or you could really take the time if it's super meaningful reflection, give yourself maybe 5 minutes. But I think 2 minutes is plenty for reflection from a middle school perspective.
Thanks for that reflection, Rio. And it makes me think about going back to Alyssa's initial question. When your show is on a cliffhanger. And yeah, you're right. That's why students, because we can't, if we ask the question, what was your day like? It was a cliffhanger because it didn't end on a reflective note. So it's very important to open, just going back to one of you said it, opening a book and closing the book, reading it from beginning to end. And you know, as a teacher, how far to take a lesson to squeeze in those last few minutes. Alyssa, you want to take on the next question?
Yes, I have this one ready for Julie. So it has to do with pre-K, which I know that you teach, and also the idea of some of the class is a half-day class and some is a full-day class. So I know this isn't exactly what you do, but you have many different groups of students throughout the day. So this teacher would like to know, what do you do with the closing circle if you have half the kids for half the day and the other half for the full day? Any ideas?
So I think, based on our conversation this afternoon, that it's important to close out, whether it be a class period or the day. So with having half the group of students staying and half leaving, I would still have some type of closing, acknowledging that, like, half of us are going and half of us are staying, but let's celebrate what we've done together this morning. And then I would still do another closing at the end of the day for the kids who stayed.
Thank you. I think that's a fantastic idea. Anyone have any ideas of how to incorporate technology in these closing periods?
I'm trying to think of like the technology that maybe people are referring to. So if it's technology like maybe something that is on the screen. I know I've seen teachers when they do a reflection, they have like this, I don't remember the name of it, but it's almost like, you know, those toy things that you go and you grab in at like the boardwalk. Well, they pick it up and it has different groupings, and then they go to the grouping and then they would have their reflection discussion there. Having a question with a visual is always very helpful because not every kid can process the words that are coming out of your mouth. So showing something on the screen is always very beneficial. You can even have some type of an audio thing where you play something and they can kind of listen, you know, and reflect. Or I know some kids, I mean, they like games of all kinds, whether they're using Look It or they're like, can we just, you know, make one on this to kind of reflect on what we've done today? Because I'd like to make a couple questions, and then they all do it. And then by the end of the week, they're like, can we play? And everyone in the class participate. And I'll be like, sure, go ahead. But there's, as far as technology, I mean, I don't really know of anything that is like not part of a screen or the computer, but games are always helpful. And I think just having that visual is beneficial as well. But I do see a more bang for your buck for a kind of discussion where you can maybe even sit at a table if you're in tables, and just listen to their discussion, because maybe they want to share, so you can give them that proximity, but they feel nervous sharing whole group. But if you have the question up available, every kid can see it, which also goes back to how do you get every kid involved so they can all either see or hear the question. I'm not sure if that's what you meant, but it's a tough question, I will say.
Yeah, I was going to say, in terms of like from a closing circle perspective, I would think it's ideal not to use any technology at all, because part of the whole closing circle format is the power of the circle. Like just like in morning meeting, we are sitting, we are facing each other. We are all looking at each other and we're discussing or having fun or playing all together. And while technology definitely has a place in our learning throughout the day, I think there's just a lot of power and importance in no technology, no screens, nothing else to distract us. We're sitting as our community, we're together. And so I would say, and from a closing circle perspective, yeah, it's more of a let's do this kind of just face to face and just kind of have some fun together.
It speaks to also just being present where your feet are.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just want to have one more quick thing.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
If you, I mean, I do this with middle school kids, but you can definitely do this. This is obviously, I'm not saying that you have to do this, but I think one thing you can do, which is fun, is when kids draw, whatever it might be, you can take your phone, take a picture of the drawing, and if you put your finger like on the image, it does like a wraparound, so you can save just the piece of art, not the surrounding. So you could take that, like email it to yourself, and then share it in a slide on like questions that you might be doing as reflection. And kids get excited because now they're like, well, I wonder when my picture is coming up. So they're more engaged. So you can actually take their artwork. I also have them draw pictures of me for fun. And it's easy because I don't have any hair. So they're just like, oh, this is a no-brainer. But then I take all the pictures with my phone and I put them into all my presentations, and especially the closing question, because I want them to see I value what they do. And I thought it was so good and so important to share their work that I show everybody. And I tell them, regardless of how good of an artist you are, I love all the pictures that you do. So that's a way you can use technology visually, use their artwork, but also get them excited about ending the period because they're like, whose picture is coming up next?
Thank you. Thank you. And we want to thank all of you, the panelists. We're going to wrap it up for today, but on the last slide, if you hang in there with us, we do have a few questions coming. Alyssa and I, we have our email. So if you want to reach out to us, we can try and get back to you. We'll get back to you as soon as we can, or refer you to Susie, Rio, or Julie to answer the question. They are the experts in the classroom. So again, we want to thank the panelists for joining us today to discuss closing of the class period and closing of the day. We hope that everyone learned about the importance of a few concrete strategies that you can walk away with and apply to your classroom setting tomorrow. So as we sit here and we think about it, one question that I would like for you all to answer in the chat box is, what is one key takeaway from today's webinar? And I know that we have a lot of takeaways the way that we've been interacting, and these wonderful educators have been sharing so many ideas. So what is one key takeaway from today's webinar? And we'll be looking through the chats. The ABC clothing is very popular. I've seen it more than one time in the chat box.
It's a fun one. Give it a try.
Yes, I think the tangible ideas of things that you can actually go and do, those are the things that are staying with me. Those are the things that are my key takeaway from tonight. And also just the idea of ensuring that you make the time for it. It doesn't need that much time. All of these educators here are in very different roles with different groups of kids, and they find the time, even if it's just a couple of minutes. So I think that's a big takeaway for me as well, hearing from these experienced educators. One other question I'm seeing in the chat that I'd just like to address before we share the resources slide with you and wrap up for the evening is that you do not get a certificate for attending the webinar. We appreciate your time. We value you being here. If you check out our website, there are many one-day workshops and courses that we would love to have you attend that do give you those certificates. But the webinars are our free contribution to your ongoing learning, and we really appreciate you being here with us. I'm seeing a lot more thoughtful ideas coming in the chat. So please be sure to take a minute and read over that. When the webinar recording is sent to you, you will also receive the transcript. So if you missed anything, you can go back and see that. Many people ask for ideas. Where am I getting these great ideas from? And here are just 3 examples. So Closing Circles is a great book for elementary school teachers. Building an Academic Community is a great book for middle school teachers. And The Responsive Classroom for Music, Art, PE, and Other Special Areas has a lot of great ideas as well for any of those special area teachers. This next slide has that email address I was referencing for some of you asking for that previous webinar. If it is not on our website or you cannot find it, please take a photo of this really quick so that you can reference it later. Our website has so many great things for you to check out as well. And then this email address here, if you want to speak directly to any of us, email there and they'll get you in touch with us as well. Amber and I, like I said, work full-time for CRS and are happy to talk more about closing the day or any other responsive classroom questions that you may have. And if you registered for this evening, then you also registered for the whole series. So we hope to see you again in January, where we will be talking about leveraging interaction for optimal learning. That is the 3rd webinar in our school year series. We also have one in March and another one in May. So we hope that you continue to join us here and continue to learn with us. We really appreciate your time, your energy, your responses. And again, our panelists, we appreciate your time as well. We've learned so much from you, and this has been a great time together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.